The pre-dawn air at Seattle-Tacoma International Airport smelled like jet fuel and rain. Captain Marcus Chen sipped his third coffee of the morning, black, no sugar, as he walked through the terminal, his rolling suitcase clicking rhythmically behind him. At 58, he'd made this walk thousands of times, but he never took it for granted. Every flight was a privilege, a responsibility. Today, Flight 447 to Washington, D.C. was his. In the crew lounge, he found Emily Rodriguez hunched over her tablet, studying approach charts with the intensity of a medical student before finals. At 26, she still had that fresh-faced eagerness that reminded Marcus of himself 3 decades ago. This was only her 8th month as a first officer on commercial jets. "Morning, Emily," Marcus said, his voice warm with the easy confidence of 30,000 flight hours. She jumped slightly, then smiled. "Morning, Captain. I was just reviewing the Dulles approach procedures. Weather looks clear all the way." "Good habit," he nodded approvingly. "But don't forget to look out the window, too. Instruments tell you numbers. Your eyes tell you the truth." They walked to the gate together, exchanging small talk about the Seahawks game and Emily's upcoming wedding. Marcus asked about her fiancé, a software engineer who still got nervous every time Emily flew. "He'll get used to it," Marcus assured her. "My wife took 10 years before she stopped checking flight tracking apps obsessively." What Marcus didn't mention was the strange tightness in his chest that morning. Probably just the coffee. Maybe he was getting too old for 3 espressos before 6 a.m. Meanwhile, in the terminal, Robert Halloway sat in a vinyl chair near Gate 12, watching the sunrise paint Mount Rainier orange and gold through the massive windows. At 72, he'd learned to appreciate sunrises. You never knew how many you had left. He looked like any other elderly traveler, faded Levi's, a worn leather bomber jacket that had seen better decades, white hair slightly too long, and reading glasses perched on his nose as he thumbed through a dog-eared Tom Clancy novel. His carry-on was small and efficient. 2 changes of clothes, his medications, and a DOP kit. 20 years of military precision didn't leave you, even in retirement. A young mother sat down next to him, struggling with a toddler and an infant. The toddler immediately fixated on Robert's book. "Airplanes," the boy said, pointing at the fighter jet on the cover. Robert smiled. "That's right, buddy. F-14 Tomcat used to fly off aircraft carriers." "My son is obsessed with planes," the mother said apologetically. "Smart kid." Robert closed the book and showed the boy the cover properly. "I used to fly planes like these a long time ago." "Really? Were you a pilot?" "Yes, ma'am. Air Force mostly. Retired now." He didn't mention the 200 combat missions, the 3 distinguished flying crosses, or the classified operations that still couldn't be discussed. He was just an old man heading home to Montana after visiting his daughter in Seattle. The boy's eyes went wide. "Did you fly fast?" Robert chuckled, his eyes crinkling. "Faster than your daddy drives, that's for sure." The boarding announcement crackled overhead. Robert stood slowly, his knees protesting, old injuries from an ejection seat decades past. He helped the mother with her bags, waited for families to board first, then found his way to seat 12A. Window seat, old habit, always know your exits, always see what's coming. In the cockpit, Marcus and Emily ran through the pre-flight checklist with practiced precision. Marcus's hands moved over switches and dials, each movement deliberate, each check verbal and confirmed. "Fuel pumps on," Emily confirmed. "Flaps set for takeoff." The routine was comforting, almost meditative. Outside, ground crew loaded the last bags, and the jetway pulled back with a mechanical whine. "Flight 447, you're cleared for pushback," the tower controller said through their headsets. "Cleared for pushback, Flight 447, Marcus acknowledged. He glanced at Emily. "Your takeoff, First Officer Rodriguez." Her face lit up. "My takeoff, Captain Chen." This was what he loved about the job, passing knowledge forward, watching young pilots grow. Emily's hands were steady on the controls as the tug pushed them back from the gate. In the cabin, flight attendants performed the safety demonstration that no one watched. Robert Halloway watched. He always watched. He knew exactly where the exits were, 2 in front, 2 over wings, 2 in back. He noted the nearest fire extinguisher. He checked that his seatbelt clicked properly. Old habits from a life spent betting against death. The engine spooled up, that deep turbine whine that Robert felt in his chest. Even after all these years, the sound stirred something in him. Anticipation, readiness, the faint electric tingle of adrenaline. The 737 rolled toward the runway, gaining speed. Marcus watched the instruments while Emily's hands commanded the aircraft with growing confidence. Flight 447, cleared for takeoff, runway 34 left. Cleared for takeoff, 34 left, Emily confirmed. The engines roared. The plane accelerated, pressing everyone back into their seats. Emily pulled back on the yoke and the ground fell away. Seattle disappeared below them, a carpet of lights against Puget Sound's dark water. The sunrise caught them at 5,000 feet, flooding the cockpit with gold. "Beautiful," Emily whispered. "Every single time," Marcus agreed. The plane climbed smoothly through 10,000 feet, then 15,000, then 20,000. The seatbelt sign dinged off. Flight attendants began preparing the coffee service. A baby cried 2 rows behind Robert. A businessman opened his laptop. A teenager put in earbuds. Life at 500 miles per hour. Robert Halloway closed his eyes, letting the engine vibration lull him toward sleep. He'd doze for an hour, then read his book, then be home in Montana by dinner. Simple, ordinary, peaceful. At 32,000 feet, the plane leveled off. The morning sun blazed through the windows. Captain Marcus Chen reached for his water bottle, feeling that tightness in his chest again. Just stress, he thought. He was wrong. Everything was about to change. 90 minutes into the flight, Captain Marcus Chen was mid-sentence when his world exploded into pain. "Emily, the weather pattern ahead looks." His chest seized. Not tightness anymore, this was a fist squeezing his heart, crushing it like a tin can. His left arm went numb, then his jaw. The cockpit tilted, or maybe that was just him. "Captain," Emily's voice seemed to come from underwater. Marcus tried to speak, to say something, anything. His mouth opened, but only a strangled gasp emerged. Sweat broke out across his forehead in an instant, cold and clammy. The pain radiated through his chest like shattered glass in his veins. "Marcus," Emily's professional composure cracked. She'd never used his first name before. His body jerked violently, every muscle contracting at once. The coffee cup flew from his hand, spraying brown liquid across the instrument panel. His right hand, still gripping the yoke, yanked it forward with the full weight of his convulsing body. The nose dropped. Emily felt the sickening lurch in her stomach as the aircraft pitched forward into a dive. The horizon line on the artificial indicator tilted crazily. The altimeter began unwinding like a broken watch. "Oh God, oh God, oh God." She grabbed Marcus's shoulders, trying to pull his 200-pound frame off the controls. He was dead weight, completely unresponsive, his face the color of concrete. His eyes rolled back, showing white. The plane screamed downward. In the cabin, the change was instantaneous and terrifying. 1 second, passengers were reading, dozing, scrolling through phones. The next second, their stomachs flew into their throats as the aircraft dropped out from under them. Oxygen masks exploded from the overhead compartments with a sound like gunshots. Bang, bang, bang. Yellow cups dangling on rubber hoses, swinging wildly. A woman screamed, then another, then everyone. Coffee service went catastrophic. Hot liquid flew through the cabin in zero-gravity arcs. The beverage cart broke free from a flight attendant's grip and slammed into the forward galley with a metallic crash. Cups, plates, and napkins became projectiles. A man's laptop flew from his tray table and struck the ceiling. A baby in 14C floated upward for a surreal second before gravity reasserted itself, and the mother caught her, screaming. In seat 12A, Robert Halloway's eyes snapped open. His hands shot out, gripping the armrests with a trained reflex. His body knew what was happening before his conscious mind caught up. Uncontrolled descent, steep angle. This wasn't turbulence. This was catastrophic failure. The overhead bins burst open under the stress. Luggage exploded into the aisle, suitcases, backpacks, duty-free bags. A hardshell carry-on struck a flight attendant in the shoulder, spinning her into a row of seats. Blood bloomed on her forehead. "Put on your masks," another attendant screamed, her own mask dangling uselessly as she tried to reach passengers. "Put on your oxygen masks." But people couldn't hear her over their own screaming, couldn't think past the animal terror of falling. The plane shuddered and groaned, metal protesting the stress of the dive. The digital display screens went dark, then flickered back on showing the flight path, a red line suddenly dropping like a stone on the map. Row 23. A businessman vomited into his lap, his body unable to process the conflicting signals of freefall and sitting still. Row 18. A college girl gripped her boyfriend's hand so hard her knuckles went white, both of them hyperventilating into oxygen masks. Row 8. An elderly man closed his eyes and began praying in Spanish, rosary beads clicking through his fingers. 30,000 feet. 29,500. 29,000. They were losing altitude at over 3,000 feet per minute. In the cockpit, Emily Rodriguez was alone with a dying man and a screaming aircraft. Her training said one thing: aviate, navigate, communicate, in that order. But her hands were shaking so badly she could barely grip the yoke. Tears blurred her vision. She'd done emergency descent drills in the simulator, but the simulator didn't have a real human being dying next to you. The simulator didn't have 147 people screaming behind a locked door. "Come on, come on, come on." She pulled back on the yoke with everything she had, but Marcus's weight was still pressed forward. She got her feet braced against the floor, pulled harder. The nose came up slightly. The dive angle decreased from catastrophic to merely terrifying. 28,000 feet. Emily's right hand shot to the radio, while her left fought the controls. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. Seattle Center, this is Flight 447. Her voice cracked, too high, too fast. "Breathe, breathe. We have an emergency. Captain is incapacitated. We are in uncontrolled descent." Flight 447, Seattle Center, say nature of emergency. The controller's voice was calm, professional, a lifeline in the chaos. "Captain collapsed, medical emergency, I can't get him off the controls." She was crying now, couldn't help it. "I need help, please, I need help." 27,000 feet. With a final desperate heave, Emily managed to shift Marcus's body to the left. His head lolled against the side window. His chest wasn't moving. She grabbed the yoke with both hands now, pulled back smoothly. The nose came up. The artificial horizon slowly, agonizingly slowly, returned toward level. But they were still descending, still falling, just slower now. In the cabin, passengers felt the change. The deadly plunge became a steep descent, still wrong, still terrifying, but survivable. "Maybe." Robert Halloway unbuckled his seatbelt. Around him, people were still screaming, still crying, still convinced they were going to die. Flight attendants struggled through the chaos, trying to restore order, trying to help. But Robert's mind had shifted into a different mode, the one forged in combat, in emergencies, in moments when seconds mattered and hesitation meant death. He stood up. His legs were steady despite the aircraft's angle, despite his age, despite everything. He started walking forward, toward the cockpit, through the pandemonium. A flight attendant grabbed his arm. "Sir, you have to sit down." He looked at her with eyes that had seen aircraft carriers on fire, had seen planes go down, had seen worse than this and survived. "I'm a pilot," he said quietly, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade, "and I'm going to help fly this plane." She stared at him, paralyzed by indecision. 26,500 feet. "Open that door," Robert Halloway said. "Now." Red alert flashed across every screen simultaneously. Senior Master Sergeant David Park was 3 hours into his shift when the automated system detected the anomaly. Flight 447, a commercial 737 out of Seattle, had deviated from its flight plan, altitude dropping rapidly. No radio contact for 47 seconds. 47 seconds of silence in the post 9/11 world meant everything. "Sir," Park's voice cut across the operations floor, "we have a situation." Colonel James Reeves was at Park's station in 4 strides. His eyes scanned the data streaming across the monitors, altitude graphs showing a near-vertical drop, flight path deviation of 12 degrees and widening, radio silence. And the trajectory, Jesus, the trajectory put it on a path toward major population centers. "Get me the duty officer at Andrews," Reeves snapped, "and alert the chain of command, now." Park's fingers flew across the keyboard. "Sir, they're making contact now. Radio communication just re-established. Pilot reports medical emergency." "I don't care." Reeves's voice was ice. "Until we have visual confirmation and positive control that aircraft is a potential threat, execute scramble protocol." Every person in the operations center knew what that meant. They'd all read the reports from United 93, from the planes that hit the towers, from the Pentagon. The protocol was clear. Unresponsive aircraft near population centers could not be allowed to reach their targets, even if those aircraft were full of innocent people. Park swallowed hard and made the call. "Joint Base Andrews, Maryland." The scramble alarm shattered the relative quiet of the alert facility. Major Sarah Chen and Captain Rick "Viper" Thompson were in the ready room, playing cards, when the klaxon blared. Both officers were on their feet before the sound finished echoing. "Scramble, scramble, scramble, pilots to aircraft." They ran. No questions. No hesitation. That's what alert duty meant, sitting in a room for 12-hour shifts, waiting for the alarm that might never come. And when it did come, you ran. Their flight suits were already on. They grabbed helmets and sprinted across the tarmac where 2 F-22 Raptors sat fueled and armed, canopies already rising on hydraulic lifts. Ground crew swarmed the aircraft like pit crews at Daytona. Sarah vaulted up the ladder, settled into the ejection seat, and her hands moved through the startup sequence with practiced precision. Muscle memory from 1,000 flights. The Pratt & Whitney engines spooled up with a rising shriek that could be felt in the chest. Her radio crackled. "Raptor 11, Raptor 12, this is Castle Rock. You are cleared for immediate takeoff, runway 19er right. Target package uploading now." Sarah's helmet display lit up with data. Civilian aircraft, Boeing 737, Flight 447, current position, heading, altitude, and then the words that made her blood run cold. Authorization, deadly force approved if DEMED necessary. Castle Rock, Raptor 11, confirm authorization. Her voice was steady despite the hammer of her heart. Raptor 11, authorization is confirmed. Rules of engagement, intercept, establish visual contact, attempt communication. If aircraft poses imminent threat to population centers and does not respond to direction, you are weapons-free. Weapons-free. That meant shooting down a commercial airliner. That meant killing everyone on board to save people on the ground. Sarah and Viper exchanged a look across the tarmac. Both were parents. Both understood the math of the terrible calculus they might have to perform. Raptor 11 copy all, rolling now. The F-22s screamed down the runway, afterburners painting the sky with twin columns of fire. At 180 knots, Sarah pulled back on the stick and the fighter leaped into the air like a falcon from a perch. They went supersonic in 90 seconds. White House Situation Room, Washington, D.C. The Situation Room was designed for moments like this. Banks of screens showed data from satellites, NORAD feeds, FAA tracking systems. A secure video link connected them to Peterson Space Base, to Andrews, to the Pentagon. National Security Advisor Janet Cordova stood at the head of the table, phone pressed to her ear, listening to the NORAD commander's briefing. Around her, military aides, Secret Service, and White House staff monitored the unfolding situation. "How long until the fighters reach it?" she asked. 7 minutes, ma'am," came the reply. On the main screen, two red triangles, the F-22s, raced toward a blue circle representing Flight 447. The numbers updated in real time. Distance closing. Time to intercept counting down. "What's the latest from the aircraft?" Cordova demanded. An Air Force general spoke up from his position at the table. "First officer reports captain suffered what appears to be a fatal heart attack. She has regained some control of the aircraft but is," he paused, checking his notes, quote, "barely holding it together. A passenger has entered the cockpit claiming to be a pilot." "A passenger?" Cordova's eyebrows shot up. "Do we have any verification?" "Working on it now, ma'am. First officer gave us a name, Robert Halloway, running it through all databases." On another screen, Flight 447's path showed it had stabilized somewhat. Still descending, but the deadly plunge had stopped. Altitude holding at 26,000 feet. "Tell those fighters to maintain position," Cordova ordered, "but keep the authorization in place. I want options if this goes sideways." Raptor 11, 35,000 feet. Sarah Chen pushed her fighter through the sound barrier, the Mach meter ticking past 1.5. Below, America spread out like a map, farmland, small towns, rivers catching the afternoon sun. Somewhere down there, 147 people were trapped in a metal tube with a dead pilot and an uncertain future. Her targeting radar had already locked onto Flight 447. On her weapons panel, lights glowed green. AIM-120 AMRAAMs ready. AIM-9X Sidewinders ready. The cannon loaded with 480 rounds. She could end this in less than a second. Fire a missile. Watch the radar blip disappear. Never see the faces. Never know the names, just follow orders. Raptor 11, Castle Rock. Target is 5 miles ahead, 12 o'clock low. Begin descent for visual intercept. Raptor 11, descending. Sarah pulled back on the throttle, let the fighter drop like a stone. Viper followed in perfect formation off her right wing. 4 miles, 3 miles, 2 miles. And then she saw it, a white speck against the clouds, sunlight glinting off aluminum. The 737 was flying straight now, but low, too low for a transcontinental flight. Sarah pulled alongside, matching speed at 300 yards, close enough to see details, close enough to see the faces in the windows if she used her targeting optics. She didn't want to see the faces. Castle Rock, Raptor 11 has visual contact. Aircraft appears stable, wings level, no obvious signs of hostile intent. Copy Raptor 11. Maintain escort position. Stand by. Sarah flew alongside the airliner, a $60 million fighter shadowing a civilian aircraft. In the cockpit of the 737, she could see movement. 2 figures. One slumped, unmoving. One in the captain's seat, and a third figure standing between them. Her radio crackled again. Raptor 11 Castle Rock. We have identification on the passenger pilot. Name is Robert Halloway, age 72, retired Air Force colonel. Call sign. There was a pause, a long pause. Castle Rock, say again, call sign. Raptor 11, the passenger's call sign was Ghost. Sarah's hand froze on the stick. Every military pilot knew that name. Ghost, the legend from Vietnam. The man who'd saved dozens of pilots, who'd performed miracles in the sky, who'd become a myth. Castle Rock, confirm. Did you say Ghost? Affirmative, Raptor 11. Ghost is flying that aircraft. New orders, maintain escort. No further action. Repeat, no further action. Ghost is coming home. Sarah felt something release in her chest. She wouldn't have to shoot down 147 people. Because a legend was in that cockpit. And legends didn't fail. The flight attendant's name was Jessica Martinez, and she'd been flying for 6 years. She thought she'd seen everything: drunk passengers, medical emergencies, even a woman giving birth at 38,000 feet. But she'd never seen a man move through chaos like it was standing still. Robert Halloway walked up the tilted aisle as if the aircraft wasn't in crisis, as if people weren't crying and praying around him, as if the world wasn't ending. His hand found seat backs for balance, but his steps were measured, deliberate. Other passengers clutched their armrests, white-knuckled and terrified. This old man in the worn leather jacket moved like he was taking a Sunday stroll. Jessica blocked the cockpit door, her training kicking in. Post 9/11 protocols were absolute. Nobody got through that door during an emergency. Nobody. Sir, you need to return to your seat immediately. Her voice shook despite her best efforts. Robert stopped 2 feet from her. Up close, she could see the lines on his face, not just age but the kind of weathering that came from hard years. His eyes were pale blue, calm as a frozen lake. I'm a pilot, he said quietly. Retired Air Force. That young woman in there is alone with a dead man and an aircraft she can't control. She needs help, my help. Sir, I can't, Jessica started. What's your name? Robert interrupted, his voice gentle but commanding. Jessica. Jessica, listen to me carefully. He spoke slowly, each word precise. I've got about 12,000 hours in military aircraft. I've talked pilots through emergency landings. I've flown damaged planes home from combat. And right now, that first officer is running on pure adrenaline and fear. In about 5 minutes, she's going to crash. Not because she's not good, but because she's human, and humans break under this kind of stress. Jessica's hand hovered over the keypad. Every instinct said no. Every regulation said no. But something in this man's bearing and the absolute certainty of his voice made her fingers move. She punched in the code. The cockpit door clicked open. Emily Rodriguez had never felt more alone in her life. Captain Chen's body was slumped against the side window, his face gray, his eyes half open and unseeing. She tried to check for a pulse while keeping the plane level, but there was nothing. He was gone. She was alone, with 147 souls depending on her. Her hands gripped the yoke so tightly her fingers had gone numb. The autopilot was damaged, warning lights flashing across the panel like a Christmas tree. She was hand-flying a commercial airliner in an emergency situation 8 months out of training. The radio kept crackling with air traffic control asking questions she couldn't answer. Her mind was a white noise of panic. Everything from training was scattered, unreachable, buried under the screaming in her head that said, "You're going to crash. You're going to kill everyone." The cockpit door opened. Emily's head whipped around, expecting a hijacker, expecting another crisis, expecting anything but what she saw. An old man, gray hair, weathered face, calm eyes. "Who the hell are you?" she gasped. "My name is Robert Halloway." He stepped inside and Jessica quickly shut the door behind him. "I'm a pilot, retired Air Force. I'm here to help you." You can't be in here. Get out, get out. Emily was screaming now, all her terror and stress erupting at this stranger invading her cockpit. Robert didn't flinch. He'd seen plenty of pilots lose it under pressure. It was normal, expected. It meant she was human. Emily, he said her name calmly, reading it from her name tag. Look at me. Right now, look at me. Something in his voice cut through her panic. She looked. You're doing great, Robert said. You pulled us out of the dive. You stabilized the aircraft. You saved everyone already. Do you understand? You already saved them. But I can't. I don't know how to land this. Marcus is dead and I can't. Yes, you can, and you will, but first I need you to breathe. In through your nose, out through your mouth. Do it with me. It was absurd. Insane. They were in a crippled aircraft with a dead captain, and this old man wanted her to do breathing exercises. But she did it anyway. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Again. Again. The white noise in her head began to recede. Good, Robert said. Now I need you to tell me what's working and what's not. Emily's training started to resurface, pushing through the panic. Engines are good. Hydraulics are nominal. Autopilot is damaged, some kind of electrical fault from when Marcus fell on the controls. I'm hand flying. Fuel. Sufficient for dulls with reserves. Excellent. What's your airspeed? 290 knots. Perfect altitude. 26,000 holding steady. Robert nodded, his eyes scanning the instrument panel. It had been 20 years since he'd flown, and he'd never flown this exact aircraft type, but cockpits were like languages. The grammar changed, but the syntax remained the same. Altimeter, airspeed indicator, attitude indicator, vertical speed. The fundamentals never changed. I can't fly this plane, he said, surprising her. What but you said? I can't fly it, he repeated, because I haven't been certified on this aircraft. I haven't flown commercially in 2 decades, but you can fly it. You are flying it. I'm just going to be your co-pilot, your coach. I'll talk you through every step. He carefully maneuvered around Captain Chen's body and settled into the jump seat behind Emily. Close enough to see all the instruments, close enough to guide her, but not touching the controls. This was her aircraft, her emergency, her landing. He was just the voice that would get her home. First things first, Robert said, his voice settling into the calm, almost hypnotic cadence of an instructor. We need to contact your airline's operations center. They'll have technical advisors who know this bird inside and out. And we need to declare a full emergency with ATC. Make it official. Emily reached for the radio with a steadier hand than before. Seattle Center, Flight 447. We are declaring an emergency. Captain is deceased. First officer is flying the aircraft with assistance from a passenger, former military pilot, requesting priority handling and emergency equipment at destination. The controller's voice came back immediately, professional but urgent. Flight 447, Seattle Center copies your emergency. We're clearing your route to Dulles. Emergency equipment will be standing by. What are your intentions? Robert leaned forward. Tell them we need a straightened approach. No holding patterns, no delays, and get your airline on the line. Emily repeated the requests. Within 2 minutes, she had the airline's emergency operations center on a separate frequency. A senior captain's voice came through, calm and experienced. Flight 447, this is Captain Andrews at operations. We're here to help. What's your current status? Robert took the microphone from Emily. Captain Andrews, this is Robert Halloway, retired Air Force, call sign Ghost. I'm assisting First Officer Rodriguez. We need technical guidance on this aircraft type for approach and landing procedures. There was a brief pause, then Ghost, Colonel Robert Halloway. Affirmative. Sir, it's an honor. We'll get you everything you need. Emily looked at Robert with new eyes. Who are you? Robert smiled slightly. Just an old pilot who refuses to let young pilots die if I can help it. Now, let's talk about how you're going to land this airplane. Outside the cockpit windows, two F-22 Raptors pulled into formation on either side of the 737, silver escorts against the blue sky. Inside, a 26-year-old first officer and a 72-year-old legend began the process of bringing 147 people safely home. Captain Chen's body remained slumped against the window, a silent reminder of what was at stake. But for the first time since the crisis began, Emily Rodriguez believed she might actually survive this. Because Ghost believed she could. And somehow that made all the difference. Senior Master Sergeant David Park thought he'd heard the name wrong. "Say again that passenger's name," he said into his headset, rewinding the audio from Flight 447's radio transmission. The Seattle Center controller's voice came through clearly. "Passenger assisting is identified as Robert Halloway, retired Air Force. Call sign Ghost." Park's fingers froze over his keyboard. He was 32 years old. He'd never flown in combat, never even met the man, but every military aviator knew that name. It was legend, myth, the kind of story instructors told to inspire young pilots. "Sir," Park's voice cracked across the operations floor. "Colonel Reeves, you need to hear this." Reeves was beside him in seconds. Park played the audio. Reeves's face went from skeptical to stunned in the space of 3 seconds. "Pull his file," Reeves ordered. "Everything we have, and get me the Pentagon now." Park's hands flew across the keyboard, accessing military personnel databases. The file that appeared on screen was heavily redacted, black bars across entire sections, but what remained was enough to paint a picture. HLLOWAY, Robert James. Rank Colonel, retired. Service, United States Air Force, 1970-11995. Total flight HOURS, 12,847. Combat MISSIONS, 203. Decorations, Distinguished Flying Cross 3, Bronze Star 2, Purple Heart. The list went on for 2 full pages. But it was the final section that made Park's breath catch. Call sign Ghost. Special notation: Emergency Landing Instructor, Combat Search and Rescue Coordinator, credited with saving 47 aircrew lives through radio assistance during emergency situations. See classified appendix for additional operations. "My God," Reeves whispered, "he's real." Park looked up. "Sir, the stories about him, are they true?" Reeves was already on the phone to the Pentagon, but he paused. "Son, the stories about Ghost don't do him justice. The real ones are still classified." The Pentagon, Arlington, Virginia. Lieutenant General Patricia Morrison was in a budget meeting when her aide burst through the door without knocking, a breach of protocol that meant something serious was happening. "General, you need to come with me, now." Morrison excused herself and followed the aide into the hallway. "This better be good, Captain." "Ma'am, there's a situation with a commercial aircraft, emergency in progress, and—" the aide hesitated. "Ghost is on board." Morrison stopped walking. "What did you say?" "Colonel Robert Halloway, ma'am. Call sign Ghost. He's assisting with the emergency." Morrison's mind reeled back 30 years. She'd been a second lieutenant, fresh out of flight school, when she'd met then Major Halloway at Nellis Air Force Base. He'd been an instructor, teaching advanced emergency procedures. She remembered his first words to her class. "You're going to have a bad day up there eventually. Everyone does. The question is whether you'll be ready for it." 3 months later, Morrison's F-16 had suffered a catastrophic hydraulic failure over the Nevada desert. She'd been 24 years old, alone, terrified, convinced she was going to die. And then Ghost's voice had come over the radio. For 11 minutes, he'd talked her through an emergency landing with almost no flight controls. His voice had been steady, calm, almost hypnotic. He'd made the impossible seem routine. She'd walked away from that landing with minor injuries and a career that would eventually lead to 3 stars. "Get me a direct line to NORAD," Morrison ordered, "and pull every pilot who ever trained under Holloway. I want them to know Ghost is flying again." Joint Base Andrews, Maryland Alert Facility. Word spread through the fighter squadron like wildfire. Major Sarah Chen sat in her F-22 holding formation with Flight 447 when the updated briefing came through her data link. She read it once, then again, then a third time because she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Passenger assisting. Call Robert HLLOWAY Ret. Call sign Ghost." "Holy shit," she whispered into her oxygen mask. Her wingman, Captain Rick Viper Thompson, came over the radio. "Boss, are you seeing this? Is that the Ghost?" "Affirmative, Viper, the one and only." Sarah had studied Ghost's tactics at the Air Force Academy. His emergency landing at Da Nang with 1 engine and no hydraulics was still taught as a case study in aviation survival. His rescue coordination during Desert Storm had saved 8 pilots behind enemy lines. But more than that, more than the missions and medals, Ghost was famous for something else. He'd never lost a pilot he was trying to save. Not once. Not ever. "Raptor 11 Castle Rock," the NORAD controller's voice came through. "Updated orders. Your mission is now protective escort. That aircraft gets priority routing, priority handling, and anything else Ghost needs. Understand?" Sarah smiled inside her helmet. "Castle Rock, Raptor 11 copies. We're bringing Ghost home." She looked across at the 737, flying steady at 26,000 feet. Somewhere in that cockpit, a legend was doing what he'd always done, saving lives. The thought made her sit up straighter in her seat, made her feel like she was part of something important. "Viper, let's tighten up the formation, make it pretty. Ghost deserves an honor guard." The 2 F-22s moved closer, wingtip to wingtip with the airliner, creating a silver triangle in the sky. Seattle Center Air Traffic Control. Controller Mike Brennan had been working Flight 447's emergency for 20 minutes. He'd handled hundreds of emergencies in his 15-year career, medical diversions, engine failures, gear problems. But this one was different. When he'd heard the name Ghost, he'd gone cold. His father had been an Air Force pilot in Vietnam, shot down over Laos in 1972. The ejection had worked, but his father had broken both legs in the landing. He'd been alone in the jungle, North Vietnamese troops searching for him, his radio barely working. For 6 hours, someone had talked to him on the emergency frequency. A calm voice, guiding him away from enemy patrols, telling him where to hide, keeping him conscious and fighting despite the pain. That voice had belonged to a pilot orbiting overhead in an F-4 Phantom, low on fuel, ignoring orders to return to base. "Call sign Ghost." The rescue helicopter had found Brennan's father just before dark. Ghost had stayed on station until the helo was safely away, then limped back to base on fumes. Brennan's father had never met Ghost, never knew his real name until years later, but he'd told his son the story 100 times. "Son, that man saved my life when he had every reason to save himself. That's the kind of pilot you want in the sky with you." Now, 30 years later, Brennan was the one helping Ghost. He cleared every aircraft out of Flight 447's path, rerouted traffic, made sure that airplane had a straight shot to Dulles with no delays, no complications, nothing but smooth air and clear skies. "Flight 447, Seattle Center," Brennan transmitted. "You have priority handling all the way to destination. Every controller from here to Virginia knows you're coming. We're going to get you home safe." Emily Rodriguez's voice came back, still shaky but stronger than before. "Thank you, Seattle Center. We really need that right now." Brennan glanced at his supervisor, saw the man nodding with approval. "Flight 447, tell Colonel Holloway." Brennan paused, his throat tight with emotion. "Tell him Mike Brennan says thank you. He'll understand." There was a brief silence. Then a different voice came over the radio, older, measured, familiar from the stories. "Controller Brennan," Ghost said, "I remember your father, Captain David Brennan, right? How's he doing?" "He's good, sir, retired, living in Florida. He still talks about you. Tell him I'm glad he made it home. And don't worry, we're going to make it home too." Brennan wiped his eyes. Around him, other controllers had stopped what they were doing, listening. One of the senior controllers, a Vietnam vet himself, stood up and saluted the radar screen showing Flight 447's blip. Others followed. 12 air traffic controllers in Seattle Center stood at attention, saluting an aircraft 500 miles away. Saluting a legend who refused to let people die. Saluting Ghost, Flight 447 cockpit, 26,000 feet. "Emily, tell me what you feel in the yoke." Ghost's voice was steady, almost meditative. He sat in the jump seat, eyes moving between the instruments and the young first officer's hands. Emily's fingers gripped the controls. "It's heavy, sluggish, like the plane is fighting me." "Good, that's good awareness. Now ease off your grip. You're strangling it. Think of it like holding a bird, firm enough that it won't fly away, gentle enough not to hurt it." She loosened her grip. Immediately she felt the difference. The aircraft's feedback became clearer, more intuitive. "Better?" Ghost asked. "Yeah, much better." That's the first lesson every fighter pilot learns the hard way. You don't wrestle an aircraft into doing what you want. You ask it nicely, and it cooperates. Behind them, flight attendants had covered Captain Chen's body with blankets. Jessica Martinez had tried to perform CPR for 15 minutes until Ghost gently told her to stop. "He's gone," Ghost had said quietly, "but we can still save everyone else. That's what Marcus would want." Now Jessica stood guard at the cockpit door, keeping passengers calm, keeping them from seeing their dead captain. Emily's voice cracked. "I keep thinking, what if I can't do this? What if I mess up the landing and everyone dies because I wasn't good enough?" Ghost leaned forward. "You want to know a secret, Emily? Every pilot thinks that before their first emergency landing. I did, your captain did, everyone does. But you're Ghost, you're a legend." He laughed softly, the sound almost sad. "You know what my first emergency landing was? Vietnam, 1972. My F-4 took ground fire, lost hydraulics, one engine on fire. I was 23 years old, so scared I could barely work the radio." Emily glanced back at him. "What happened?" "There was an old pilot, guy named Ironside, must have been 50, ancient in my eyes back then. He talked me down from 40,000 feet, talked me through every step. I landed that dying aircraft on one engine with no hydraulics because his voice made me believe I could." Ghost paused, his pale blue eyes distant with memory. "I asked him later how he stayed so calm. You know what he told me? He said, 'Son, I wasn't calm. I was terrified for you, but you needed my confidence more than I needed to express my fear. That's what I'm doing for you now, being the voice that believes in you.'" Emily's throat tightened. "Did Ironside make it home?" "He died 3 weeks later, shot down covering an extraction. But before he went, he made me promise something. He said, 'When you get old like me and some scared young pilot needs you, you be that voice for them. Pass it forward.' So this is you, passing it forward." "For 40 years now," Ghost said simply, "and I'm not stopping today." The Airline Operations Center patched through Captain Andrews, a senior 737 pilot with 20,000 hours. "First Officer Rodriguez, Captain Andrews here. Let's walk through the approach checklist. When you're ready, we'll talk about landing configuration." Ghost gestured for Emily to take the lead. This was her aircraft, he was just the guide. Captain Andrews, this is Rodriguez. We're currently at 26,000 feet, speed 290 knots, fuel showing sufficient for Dulles with 45 minutes reserve. Autopilot is damaged. Hand flying only. Copy that. Impressive work keeping her stable. Now, let's talk about your descent profile. For the next 20 minutes, Emily and Captain Andrews worked through procedures while Ghost monitored and corrected. His knowledge was decades old, but the fundamentals remained unchanged. Gravity, lift, drag, thrust. The physics didn't care about technology. Throttle back gradually, Ghost instructed. Let the nose drop naturally, don't force it. The plane wants to descend, just guide it. Emily's hands moved with increasing confidence. The descent rate settled at 1,500 feet per minute, perfect for a controlled approach. Outside the cockpit windows, the F-22s maintained their escort. Major Sarah Chen watched the 737 descend through broken clouds, nodding the smooth, professional handling. That's good flying, she transmitted to her wingman. Ghost still got it. Boss, you think he's actually touching the controls? Viper asked. No way. Ghost never flew the plane for you. He made you fly it yourself. That's what made him Ghost. Flight 447 cabin. The passengers had calmed somewhat. The initial panic had given way to nervous tension. People clutched their armrests. Some prayed. Others stared out windows at the fighter jets flying escort. A teenage girl in row 15 was filming on her phone. Oh my God, there are actual fighter jets next to us. This is insane. Her mother grabbed her arm. Put that away, Sarah. Mom, people need to see this. We're literally in a military escort. In row 23, the businessman who'd vomited earlier was now on his laptop, frantically typing emails to his family. I love you. If something happens, know that I love you. Robert Halloway's empty seat in 12A drew curious glances. The passengers near it had seen the old man walk forward with purpose. Word had spread through the cabin in whispers. I heard he's a pilot. Someone said military. The flight attendants led him into the cockpit. Are we going to be okay? That was the question everyone wanted answered. Flight 447 cockpit, 18,000 feet. Emily, I need you to do something difficult now, Ghost said quietly. What? We need to move Captain Chen's body. Can't have him in the seat when we land. Flight attendants will need the space for emergency procedures. Emily's face crumpled. I can't. Marcus was my mentor. He was teaching me everything and now he's... I know, but he'd want you to finish the flight properly. Honor him by doing this right. Emily nodded, wiping her eyes. Ghost called Jessica into the cockpit. Together, they carefully moved Captain Chen's blanket-trapped body to the floor beside the jump seat. It was cramped, undignified, horrible. But necessary. I'm sorry, Marcus, Emily whispered. Ghost placed a hand on her shoulder. He knows. Now let's make sure his last flight ends safely. That's the best tribute you can give him. Emily settled back into the captain's seat, her seat now. She scanned the instruments with new determination. Dulles approach, Flight 447 descending through 15,000 feet, requesting final approach clearance. Flight 447, Dulles approach, you're cleared for straighten approach to runway 19 right. Wind is calm, visibility unlimited. Emergency equipment is standing by. You've got this. Ghost smiled at the controller's last words. The whole system was pulling for them. Emily, let's configure for landing, he said. Flaps to 5 degrees. Her hand moved to the flap lever. Flaps 5. Good speed. 200 knots slowing. Perfect, gear down. Emily hesitated. Once the landing gear deployed, they were committed. No going around. This was it. Trust yourself, Ghost said softly. You've already done the hard part. You kept us alive. Landing is just the finish line." Emily pulled the gear lever. 3 green lights illuminated. "Gear down and locked," she said, her voice stronger. The aircraft shuddered slightly as the wheels extended into the airstream. The F-22s pulled away, giving them space for the approach. Dulles Airport appeared ahead through the windscreen, a sprawling complex of runways and terminals bathed in afternoon sunlight. Somewhere down there, Emily's fiancé was probably watching flight tracking apps, terrified. Her parents, her friends, everyone she loved. "I can see the runway," Emily said. Ghost leaned forward, his weathered hands hovering near the controls without touching them. "Then let's bring her home, pilot. Nice and easy. I'm right here with you." Emily Rodriguez, 26 years old, 8 months out of training, lined up for the most important landing of her life. And beside her, a legend prepared to do what he'd done for 40 years. Guide someone home. Fire Chief Raymond Torres had seen every kind of aircraft emergency in his 28 years. Engine fires, gear collapses, belly landings. But this was different. This was a dead captain and a rookie first officer trying to land with only a 72-year-old passenger for help. He stood on the tarmac watching the sky, surrounded by 30 fire trucks arranged in perfect formation along runway 19 right. Ambulances lined the taxiway. Paramedics stood ready. Foam trucks were positioned to spray fire retardant if needed. Behind him, the airport had been shut down completely. Every other aircraft diverted. Every runway cleared. Flight 447 would have the entire airport to itself. Torres' radio crackled. "Command, this is Tower. Flight 447 is 10 miles out, descending through 5,000 feet. They're lined up perfectly." "Copy, Tower. All units stand by." Torres took a deep breath. "And pray for that young pilot." Flight 447 cockpit, 5,000 feet. Emily's world had narrowed to the instruments in front of her and Ghost's voice in her ear. Everything else faded away. The fear, the grief, the knowledge that 147 lives depended on the next 5 minutes. "Airspeed?" Ghost asked. 160 knots. Altitude? 4,000 feet, descending at 700 feet per minute. Flaps? 15 degrees. "Good, you're in the groove, Emily. Right on profile. Fly the plane like you've done this 1,000 times." But she hadn't done it 1,000 times. She'd done it exactly 0 times in a real emergency. Every landing before this had been routine, with a captain beside her, with backup systems working, with no one dead on the cockpit floor. Her hands trembled on the yoke. "I can feel you tensing up," Ghost said calmly. "Breathe. You're not going to crash. Look at your instruments, everything is perfect. You're flying like a professional because you are a professional." The runway appeared through the windscreen, a long strip of concrete that looked impossibly small from this altitude. "Ghost, what if I mess up the flare? What if I come in too fast or too steep or—" "Emily," his voice cut through her spiral, "you know what the difference is between a good landing and a great landing." "What?" "Absolutely nothing if everyone walks away. I've made landings that bounced 3 times. I've made landings that were so hard they cracked the runway, but everyone lived, so they were good enough." "Really?" "Really? Your job isn't to be perfect. Your job is to get this aircraft on the ground in one piece. That's it. Bounce it, slam it, grease it, I don't care, just get it down." Emily felt something release in her chest. Permission to be imperfect. Permission to survive rather than excel. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I can do that." "I know you can." Flaps to 30. Her hand moved to the lever. Flaps 30. The aircraft slowed further, nose pitching up slightly. The runway grew larger in the windscreen. Raptor 11, 8,000 feet. Major Sarah Chen pulled her F-22 into a wide orbit, giving Flight 447 the airspace it needed. From here, She had a perfect view of the drama unfolding. The 737 descended through scattered clouds, gear down, flaps extended. It looked vulnerable, fragile. Sarah knew better than most how heavy a commercial airliner was, how much energy needed to be dissipated in those final seconds before touchdown. "Boss, you think she can do this?" Viper asked over the radio. Sarah watched the 737's approach angle, the steady descent rate, the perfect alignment with the runway center line. "Ghost is in that cockpit," Sarah said. "She'll do it, she has to." Her helmet display showed the aircraft's altitude ticking down, 3,000 feet, 2,500. Sarah's finger hovered over her radio transmit button. She wanted to say something, to offer encouragement, but the frequency needed to stay clear. Instead, she whispered into her oxygen mask, "Come on, Ghost, bring her home." Flight 447 cockpit, 1,000 feet. "You're high," Ghost said, his voice still calm. "Reduce power slightly." Emily pulled back the throttles. The descent rate increased. "Too much, add a touch back." She adjusted. The glide path stabilized. 900 feet. The ground rushed up to meet them. The runway was huge now, filling the windscreen. Emily could see individual lights, markings, the emergency vehicles lined up like toys. "Landing checklist complete," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "Good, now listen to me carefully, Emily. At about 50 feet, I'm going to tell you to flare. When I do, you're going to pull back smoothly on the yoke. Not fast, not slow, smooth, like you're picking up a baby." "Like picking up a baby," Emily repeated. 700 feet. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Sweat dripped down her temple. Her hands were welded to the controls. 500 feet. "You're right on speed," Ghost said. "Right on glide path. This is beautiful flying, Emily. Your captain would be proud." 300 feet. The runway threshold passed beneath them. Emergency vehicles blurred past in her peripheral vision. She could see firefighters watching, waiting. 200 feet. "Stay with it, keep the nose steady. Don't chase the instruments, look outside." 100 feet. Emily's world reduced to a tunnel. Runway, yoke, throttles, Ghost's voice. 50 feet. "Flare now, pull back, smooth and steady." Emily pulled the yoke toward her chest. The nose lifted, the descent slowed, the ground reached up. 20 feet. "Hold it off, hold it." 10 feet. The stall warning chirped, the aircraft settled. 5 feet. "Let it come down." The main wheels kissed the runway. Then bounced. Emily's heart stopped. They were airborne again, 10 feet up, the landing botched. "Stay with it," Ghost's command cut through her panic. "Don't overcorrect, just let it settle again." The aircraft came down a second time. This time the wheels slammed into the concrete with a teeth-rattling bang that shook the entire airframe. Not a kiss, a punch, hard enough that overhead bins popped open, hard enough that people screamed. But the wheels stayed down. "Thrust REVRSRS now," Ghost shouted. Emily yanked the thrust reverser levers. The engines roared, pushing against their forward motion. The aircraft shuddered violently. "Brakes, full brakes." Her feet jammed the brake pedals to the floor. The anti-skid system pulsed under her feet. The aircraft decelerated with brutal force, throwing everyone forward against their seat belts. The end of the runway approached, closer, closer. They were going too fast. They weren't going to stop. They'd roll off the end of the runway into the grass, maybe flip, maybe explode. But then the deceleration caught up. The speed bled away. 80 knots. 60 knots. 40 knots. 20 knots. 10 knots. Stop. The aircraft sat motionless on the runway, engines idling, exactly 1,200 feet from the end. Plenty of room to spare. They were down. They were alive. All 147 of them. Emily's hands wouldn't release the yoke. Her muscles had locked. She stared straight ahead, not quite believing it was over. "Emily," Ghost said softly, "you can let go now, we're home." Her hands opened. The yoke centered itself. She turned to look at Ghost and the dam broke. She sobbed, great heaving sobs that shook her entire body. All the terror, all the stress, all the grief for Captain Chen, it all came out at once. Ghost reached forward and placed his weathered hand on her shoulder. "You did good, pilot," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You did real good." Outside, the emergency vehicles surrounded them, lights flashing. Firefighters in silver suits stood ready with foam hoses. Paramedics rushed forward with stretchers. But there was no fire, no injuries, just a battered 737 sitting safely on the runway. In the cabin, passengers erupted into applause and tears. Strangers hugged each other. People called loved ones, crying too hard to speak. Jessica Martinez opened the cockpit door. Her face was streaked with tears. "You did it," she whispered. "You actually did it." Emily wiped her eyes and keyed the radio with shaking hands. "Dulles Tower, Flight 447 is. We're down, we're safe, we're all safe." The tower controller's voice came back, barely professional through his own emotion. "Flight 447, welcome home, welcome home." On the taxiway, Fire Chief Torres removed his helmet and wiped his eyes. In the sky above, Major Sarah Chen watched the scene unfold and smiled inside her oxygen mask. And in the cockpit, Robert "Ghost" Holloway closed his eyes and whispered a prayer of thanks. 40 years of keeping pilots alive. And he'd just done it one more time. Dulles International Airport, runway 19er right, immediate aftermath. The aircraft sat silent on the runway, engines finally spooled down. Through the cockpit windows, Emily Rodriguez watched firefighters approach cautiously, then relax when they saw no smoke, no fire, no crisis beyond what had already been survived. "We should open the doors," Emily said, her voice hoarse from crying. "Let people off." Ghost shook his head gently. "Paramedics need to board first. Check passengers for injuries. Standard procedure after a hard landing." He paused. "And they need to remove Captain Chen with dignity." Emily's face crumpled again at the mention of Marcus. Ghost squeezed her shoulder. "He got you most of the way home, Emily. You just finished what he started. That's how it works. We all just pass the torch forward until everyone's safe." The forward door opened. Paramedics boarded, followed by FAA investigators, airline officials, and airport security. The passengers were asked to remain seated while medical teams did a quick assessment. Minor bruises. One possible wrist fracture from the hard landing, but everyone was alive. Jessica Martinez appeared at the cockpit door. "Sir, there are about 50 news cameras out there. They're calling you a hero. They want interviews." Ghost grimaced. "I'm 72 years old. I don't need to be on television." "But..." "Jessica, I helped, that's all. Emily flew this aircraft. She made the decisions. She brought everyone home. If anyone deserves interviews, it's her." Emily looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. "You saved us." "No," Ghost said firmly. "You saved them. I was just the voice in your ear. Don't ever forget that distinction." 3 hours later, Dulles Airport Terminal. The airport terminal had transformed into a media circus. Camera crews from every major network jostled for position. Reporters shouted questions. The story was already going viral. Passenger pilot saves 147 lives, and legendary Air Force colonel emerges from retirement to guide emergency landing. Emily sat in an airport conference room, airline lawyers on one side, FAA investigators on the other, walking through every detail of the emergency. Ghost had been separated from her immediately, different interviews, different investigators. She kept asking where he was. No one seemed to know. Meanwhile, outside the terminal, Robert Holloway slipped through a maintenance exit. He'd given one brief statement to the FAA investigator, declined all media requests, and simply left. He caught a taxi to a nearby hotel, booked a room under his name, ordered room service, sat by the window watching planes take off from Dulles, their lights arcing into the darkening sky. His phone, a basic flip phone that made his daughter laugh, rang constantly. News producers, documentary filmmakers, book publishers. He turned it off. In the quiet of the hotel room, Ghost finally allowed himself to feel the weight of what had happened. Another close call. Another group of people who'd almost died. Another young pilot who'd needed him. How many was that now? 40, 50. He'd lost count years ago. 10 days later, Arlington National Cemetery. Captain Marcus Chen was laid to rest on a crisp November morning. The airline provided full honors, uniformed pilots serving as pallbearers, a missing man formation flyover, a flag-draped casket. Emily stood in the front row, still wearing bandages on her wrists from where she'd gripped the yoke too hard. Her fiancé stood beside her, one arm around her waist, supporting her as she wept. The crowd was large, fellow pilots, flight attendants, family, friends. And in the very back row, nearly hidden behind a marble headstone, stood Robert Holloway. He wore his old Air Force dress uniform, the one that still fit after all these years. The ribbons on his chest told stories most people would never know. He stood at attention as Marcus's casket was lowered into the earth. After the ceremony, as people filtered away, Marcus's widow approached Emily. She was a small woman, elegant even in grief, with kind eyes that reminded Emily of Marcus himself. "You're the first officer," she said softly. "Yes, ma'am, I'm so sorry. I tried to save him, but—" "SHH," Marcus's widow took Emily's hands. "I know you did. Marcus talked about you. He said you were going to be a great pilot someday. He was proud to teach you." Emily couldn't speak through her tears. "Is the other pilot here?" the widow asked. "The one who helped you land, I'd like to thank him." Emily turned, scanning the thinning crowd. She spotted Ghost near the back, preparing to leave. "There," she pointed. "Mr. Holloway, wait." Ghost stopped, turned slowly. Emily and Marcus's widow approached him. "Colonel Holloway," the widow said, extending her hand. "I'm Sarah Chen, Marcus's wife. I wanted to thank you for bringing everyone home safely, for making sure my husband's last flight didn't end in tragedy." Ghost took her hand gently. "Ma'am, I'm deeply sorry for your loss. Your husband was an excellent pilot. He gave First Officer Rodriguez the foundation she needed to succeed." "Will you walk with me for a moment?" Sarah asked. They walked among the white headstones, Emily trailing respectfully behind. "I've been thinking," Sarah said, "about what Marcus would want his legacy to be. He loved teaching young pilots. He believed in passing knowledge forward. You gave Emily that gift when she needed it most. That's exactly what Marcus would have done if he could." Ghost nodded slowly. He raised her well. When the crisis hit, her training took over. That was his doing. "And your voice kept her from panicking. That was your doing." Sarah stopped walking, turned to face him. "Thank you for being there. Thank you for caring about strangers enough to risk yourself." "Ma'am, I wasn't at risk. You were 72 years old with no recent flight experience, taking responsibility for 147 lives. That took courage." She smiled sadly. "Marcus would have liked you." 2 weeks later, Kalispell, Montana. Emily Rodriguez found Ghost in a small coffee shop on Main Street. He sat by the window reading the newspaper, a cup of black coffee cooling beside him. He looked utterly ordinary, just another retired man whiling away a Saturday morning. She slid into the booth across from him. "How did you find me?" Ghost asked, not looking up from his paper. "Your daughter. I tracked her down through Air Force records. She told me where you like to have coffee." "Helen talks too much. but he was smiling as he folded the paper. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. "I'm going back to flying next week," Emily said finally. "The airline cleared me. Psych evaluation, retraining, the whole process. They're assigning me to a new captain." "Good, you should fly. You're talented." "I'm terrified." "You should be terrified. Fear keeps you sharp. Just don't let it paralyze you." Emily traced patterns on the table with her finger. "Why did you help me, Ghost? Really? You could have stayed in your seat. Let someone else deal with it." Ghost was quiet for a long moment, his pale blue eyes distant. "Vietnam, 1972, he said finally. "I told you about Ironside, the pilot who talked me down. What I didn't tell you was that 3 weeks before Ironside died, I asked him why he did it. Why he risked his life staying on station when he was low on fuel, when he could have left me to die. What did he say? He said, because I remember being exactly where you are, young, scared, certain I was going to die. Someone saved me. Now I save others. That's how it works. We all just pass it forward until everyone gets home." Ghost met Emily's eyes. "I've been passing it forward for 40 years, Emily. 40 years of helping scared pilots find their way home. And someday, when you're my age, some young pilot is going to need you. And you'll help them because someone helped you. That's the chain. That's how we all survive." Emily's throat tightened. "How many people have you saved?" "I stopped counting a long time ago." "Are you going to keep doing it?" Ghost smiled, the expression crinkling the weathered lines of his face. "Until I can't anymore. Until the day comes when I'm not there when someone needs me. But I hope that's a long way off." He stood, dropping cash on the table for both their coffees. "You're going to be a great pilot, Emily Rodriguez. You've already proven that. Trust yourself. Trust your training. And when the bad days come, and they will come, remember that you've already survived the worst day. Everything else is just flying." He walked toward the door. "Ghost," Emily called after him. He turned. "Thank you for everything." He nodded once, then stepped out into the Montana sunshine and disappeared down the street. Emily watched him go, this legend who'd saved her life, who'd become ordinary again with the simple act of walking away. Around her, the coffee shop continued its Saturday morning rhythm. No one recognized the old man who just left. No one knew what he'd done. No one would ever know about most of the lives he'd saved. And that was exactly how Ghost wanted it. Epilogue. Emily Rodriguez flew for 33 more years. She became a captain, then a training instructor, then head of her airline's emergency procedures department. She saved 4 pilots during her career, talking them through emergencies, lending them her strength when they had none left. She never forgot the voice that had guided her home. Robert "Ghost" Holloway lived quietly in Montana for another 12 years. He died at age 84, in his sleep, in the small house he'd built with his own hands decades before. His funeral was small, family, a few old Air Force buddies, and several pilots he'd helped over the years who'd tracked him down to say goodbye. Emily Rodriguez gave the eulogy. She talked about courage and humility, about legends who chose to be ordinary, about the invisible chains of kindness that bind us all together, teacher to student, mentor to protege, survivor to survivor. And she ended with the words Ghost had told her in that Montana coffee shop. "We all just pass it forward until everyone gets home." The F-22 missing man formation that flew over his funeral was a pilot's salute, 4 fighters roaring overhead, one peeling away toward the heavens. Ghost was going home one final time. But the legacy he left behind, the pilots he'd saved, the knowledge he'd shared, the courage he'd given to the terrified, that would live on. Passed forward, generation after generation, until everyone got home. The end.